think the most important thing to know about the next generation of Americans, the Millennials, is that more than any other generation in recent history, they're used to an urban lifestyle, and they will seek to create that urban lifestyle no matter where they go. This is going to have significant implications on American culture and on what we've always called the American dream. By urban lifestyle, I don't mean this. Young people will always be attracted to the big cities of New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Boston. But too little of the United States really looks like this for changes that happen here to be set to change America. We're the Millennials. They're people who became adults around 2000 at the beginning of the new millennium. So that means they're in their 20s to early 30s. They're the next statistically significant generation after the baby boomers, who are older, now 40s to 60s. And by 2020, 1 in 3 adults will be millennials. That's important. 1 in 3 adults will be millennials. And this is a generation that's had the internet their whole life. So quite often, they're described as the I generation. But I'm going to contain this talk to changes in the built world. So let's compare and contrast. On the left, in that picture, at the head of the table is a baby boomer. It's that young woman with the pearls. She's a teacher over at the Cleaver House for dinner. This is an episode of Leave It to Beaver from 1953. Now, that baby boomer was born in the suburbs. She grew up in the suburbs. She went to college in the suburbs, and we'd be surprised if she can get through this episode, really, without getting married and getting a house in the suburbs. Opposite her, at the end of the table, is Ward Cleaver. He's from a different generation. He's from the GI generation. Now, Tom Brokaw called it the greatest generation. When he was young, cities looked like this. Life happens on the street. Every storefront is filled. All of the buildings are human scale, very rarely more than 3 to 4 stories, and everything is connected by transit. But Ward went off to fight in World War II, and he and Mrs. Cleaver deferred having children until he got back. When he got back, they built what they considered kind of the perfect world for raising children. In the image on the left, you see that's the world that he's drawing in the sand with a stick. And this kind of became the American dream. And this American dream was supported by Levitt & Sons and General Electric and Ford Motors. All the industries of the time sort of combined in order to build this new kind of American lifestyle. And it wasn't bad. The American dream, for a lot of people, this kind of American dream is always going to be there. And it's always going to look like that. But back in the city, we know what happened. The middle class went to the country, and 2 different societies were effectively created. This picture shows an inner city breadline. Back in the city, plans were made to sort of improve the city by tearing down the human-scaled buildings that I showed and by building towers, and then adding a lot of nature. It's called Towers in a Park. And this image is from a model of the plan for Detroit. And this is an image of Detroit. Instead of the towers in a park, what they got were towers in a parking lot. And the city became a lot less habitable. And a huge infrastructure network was created to get people out of the cities as it got harder and harder to live there, to the point that America now looks like this. And this is the world that the baby boomer grew up in. Subdivisions, low density, very little connection between the buildings, or even quite often between the people. And this is very different for the millennial. You see, he came to the city after those years of neglect had sort of reached a peak, and things in cities now are starting to improve.
Now, he's sitting at this table with his wife on the other side. He grew up in the suburbs, but he left it to go to college. He met his wife. They got a dog. Eventually, they would have a kid. And he doesn't want to go back to the suburbs. He likes the urban lifestyle of sitting on the, out on the street and with his friends and dining. He invested in a sort of downtown neighborhood because, for him, the city is on the way up. After many years of neglect and disrepair, for him to buy low and sell high meant actually investing in the city. Now those two different relationships to the city create a very different conception of home. For the baby boomer, home is the little house on the little lot. For the millennial, home is more nuanced. It's the unit that they live in, but it's also the corner store and the restaurant and the grocery. It's also the tavern where he watches the game. It's the bike shop, and it's the school down the end of the street where he walks his son. And they, with these different relationships of the city in mind, they create different kinds of suburbs and different kinds of neighborhoods. The baby boomers on the left, everything was separated. Zoning took basically the shopping and the residential and the office and civic uses and workplaces, and they separated them out as much as possible. Such that, you see those big, large white buildings with the white roofs, even when those shopping centers were close to the houses, you really couldn't walk from the house to the shopping center because there were buffers and there were fences, and the shopping center had an enormous parking lot in the front of it, and the streets were no longer really meant for walking. And whenever they could in those neighborhoods, they would put these cul-de-sacs to kind of keep the separations apart. The millennial, there's Glenwood Park, and you see the difference here. You walk right down this street. This is the cafe where he was eating at. You take a left. Here's their unit, and there's a great park down in the end. And parking is handled mid-block, and there's a great interconnected network of streets, and all the houses face those streets. You take another look at Glenwood Park. This is Vickery's, where he's eating, and there's a great little bocce ball court right there. And just a couple blocks away is his house. His unit is the one with the balcony. And on the way to the park, when he takes his son to the park, he passes by these mid-sized houses and these large houses of people from an entirely different economic background as he. Houses that one day he probably would like to live in. There's a far higher degree of integration. The other important thing about Glenwood Park and this new model for neighborhoods is that it was built on an infill site. It's 2 miles from the downtown. It was a site that formerly had a recycling facility. And it's just about 30 acres, and that's all you need to create a complete community. And the fact that it's close to the downtown is excellent for him, because it means he can take his bike or he can take transit into the downtown, which is critically important to the millennial, because they don't want to own a car. 1 in 3 millennials have decided they're going to try to get by without a car. They really just don't want it. They don't want the hassle of it. It's gotten to a point where even Motor Trend magazine is asking the question, is the automobile over? For him, the driving is no longer fun like it once was. And the open road is no longer open. It's congested. It's the most frustrating experience of the day to actually be on the road. And for him, when he wants to go see his friends, he doesn't get in the car to do it. He gets online. The new fetish technology of this generation, like the car was in the 1950s, is the iPod and the iPad, the tablet computer, and the smartphone. Because with that, he can get onto Facebook, he can talk about places he likes, he can show pictures of his son, he can talk about the events that he's going to. The interesting thing about Facebook is that, you're able to create these events, like this one, but even events that have no real purpose at all, and you can get 100 people at these events instantaneously. This was before Facebook. Robert Putnam wrote a book in 2000. It was about the decline of American community. He talked about how organizations like bowlers, people used to bowl in these organizations, and then more and more they were bowling alone. And this happened with Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and the NAACP or the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, professional civic organizations. It also happened with the Kiwanis and the Rotary. It happened with all these organizations that saw decreasing participation from 1960 to 2000. This is not at all the world that the millennial knows. Facebook allows these events to such a point that the millennial's social calendar is filled all the time. He's connected. But the secret to Facebook is that you're only as connected in that digital world as you are in the real world. You only have as many real friends as you have in the real life. And your social network on Facebook is just an extension of what you have in real life. So if the millennial wants, to be connected, what's critically important is that he lives in cities that are built for him. And this has become the #1 economic development strategy of cities throughout the country, to build a place for the urban lifestyle. And Montgomery is better at it than most other places. So they put in place a code that protects the human scale buildings. They have a terrific, arts district where you can get a beer and have some food, but you can also live above the units. So it's not just an entertainment district. It's a complete neighborhood. And not far from that are the houses with the front porches that you can live in, and large portions of the downtown are reserved for civic uses. I'll talk about these codes in just a second. What Montgomery does that's totally innovative, the surprising innovation in Montgomery is that formula is not just being used in the downtown. It's also being used in new subdivisions. So the Waters, not very far from the downtown, has at its corner a corner store, and it has a restaurant. People can live above it. There are offices. And then, not very far away, a couple blocks, there's these little houses on little greens, and then there's the mid-size houses and the large houses, and this whole settlement, not a subdivision, settlement, has a large green belt around it. My favorite of these communities is definitely Hampstead, which has the, this great little main street. There's a farmer's market going on there, and cobblestone pavers. And not very far from that, just a couple blocks, just a couple-minute walk, are the little houses that someone can afford, and then the mid-sized houses, then the large houses. And by virtue of building densely in one area, they're able to preserve a huge area for a community farm. It kind of surprised you, I think, perhaps to hear that this is called an urban lifestyle, with the barn and the farmer's market and the person playing a fiddle in the garden area. But it is because these people all know each other. That's what defines the urban lifestyle, the connectedness between people. It's entirely different from this, right? Here in the subdivisions, when when the garage door goes up and it goes down, who knows what happens inside of there, right? And there's really no street to walk, and if there might be a green space, an obligatory green space that they're required to put in, but it's just some remnant of the subdivision process and nobody really uses it. This is not a connected environment. Here's the formula for creating these places. It's called the SMART code. The city of Montgomery is a pioneer in them. And you have the T5 area, which is the urban area, and you have a rural zone not very far away, and it's only a 5 or 10-minute walk every time. And they have transect zones, which instead of separating everything out, integrate things in. A lot of new communities around the country are using this formula. One of the ones I really like is Serenbe outside of Atlanta. They have their main street, they have the attached, they have the mid-sized to large houses, and what they did with their green space on the side is they built a big equestrian center and paths to connect everybody. What I really like about Baldwin Park, Orlando, is on their main street, they have the national chains. They have the CVS, and they have the Five Guys Burger Fries, and they have the Subway, and they have a Publix, all built right into the main street. And they follow that same formula to create the diversity in the place. We could show many of these communities. What's interesting about Savannah, outside of Tucson, is it shows this isn't a white picket fence situation. For example, out in the desert Southwest, there's no picket fence and there's no front porch because wood is more scarce, so you sit in the shade of the terrace, but you're still within conversation distance to the sidewalk, which is critical. And they don't have the main street. In the tradition of Hispanic urbanism, they have a large courtyard, it's shaded, but they still have the bike shop, and they still have the restaurants, and they still have the corner stores. All of this is peculiarly of interest to me. I really am fascinated by this because I grew up in a little town, a little coastal community in Rhode Island, and it followed this exact same formula. We had the main street, and we had the church. This is the unit I pretty much grew up in when I was young. This was my bedroom window. I could go down this street, it was an attached unit. I could go down this one, and there was the larger houses, and I could go to the community green, the common. And when I got a little bit older, my family moved us to the subdivision. It was felt that this was, for some reason, good for children. And as soon as I got a bicycle, and as soon as I could, my brother and I went right back to the downtown every chance we could get, because it was interesting down there, and there was a variety, and there was things going on, and different kinds of people. Now, I think there's a chance you might want to go out and find one of these communities and buy a unit immediately. I should let you know that it's still a little pricey, for the same reason that first Macintosh was pricey. It's because they're rare, they still are, and they're hard to make still. The people who build these places are heroes, because they have to brave land development code and a zoning code from the 1950s. That's one of the reasons that we're creating the SMART code here and in other places, is to make it a lot easier for them. Now, you don't necessarily have to go out and move to a new community. Your community can be upgraded with small urban interventions, and Montgomery's phenomenal with this too, and you probably know these places. Here's Old Cloverdale, and there's a whole neighborhood of single-family houses mid-size, and large. And what they did down near the intersection is they put in the kind of housing, the kind of attached units that millennials might want to actually live at. And then right next door to that, this is next door to this. And right next door to that comes a multi-story mixed-use environment. What AMP Properties does is it shows how little urbanism is really necessary to create the urban lifestyle, such that in old Cloverdale, right, they created the hippest, hottest, most exciting neighborhood in Montgomery. Now, this is an idea that could work for just about anyone. There's no generational divide. The baby boomers are getting a little bit older. They don't want to drive as much, and they really don't want to be alienated in the subdivisions. So I think this is potentially an idea we can all get behind. Let's call it the redesign of America. Thank you very much.